All right, let's jump right into it. So we had review goals from last week. Giannis, you had your scripts to anonymize production data and wrap up your non-partitioning efforts. How did you do last week?
Yeah, so we did not work on the anonymizer because we decided to work more on the benchmark, and I think that the benchmark is in good shape. Andreas has, after we did some updates, Andreas has left it running on a GCP instance, and we will check tomorrow how things are working. I have also one follow-up there to check all the query plans that we generate with this with a benchmark, so that we against production, so that we are sure 100% sure that everything we generate is in accordance to what we are seeing in production. So yeah, that's why we did not work on the anonymizer script, and maybe we will postpone it. Maybe we will work on it, but the initial decision was not to work on it at the moment. Just focus on the benchmark.
Okay. And then
yeah.
non-partitioning efforts.
Oh, a lot of updates. MRs MRs have already been merged. MRs have been reverted. MRs will be created again. But yeah, overall, everything is done. If I only have to fix one MR that was reverted, and then my full focus will be on our partitioning stuff. Also, an update on our Rubocops has been is almost ready to be merged, and some documentation updates have been done. So overall, I'm satisfied.
Okay. Pat?
Yeah, the second part of the migration helper that was merged the end of last week, so that is in there. The third part is not in quite. I thought I would have that wrapped up last week. I didn't quite get that done. It's a little bit more complicated than I was initially thinking, but it's coming along well. And I was able to get one of my other MRs merged that's been hanging out there for a while. I guess I kind of wanted to see for the MRs that we have, I guess that like usually we try to do some kind of like production validation that the MR has gone in, but I guess a lot of these that are tooling, we don't really have a way to validate. There's really nothing to validate other than it's been merged. So I guess once it's been merged, we can just say the issue's closed. We're good on that.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. All right, then is there anything else to talk about from last week? Anything to wrap up? Couldn't tell if you were thinking there, Giannis, or if you were agreeing. All right, I'll hold on.
1 second to make sure that I did not forget to discuss anything. No, yeah, everything was discussed.
Okay. So goals for the coming week. Pat and I chatted a little bit yesterday, and you all talked last Thursday when I couldn't make the office hours. So sounded like the goal for this week was to get the partitioned audit tables running in parallel in production so that we can do some measurements comparison between what we have now and what the partition tables look like. Is that correct? So just the tables, nothing else.
Well, not all the MRs for that have been merged yet. So there's one. So for me, at least, I would say my goal is to get the third piece of that, the migration helper, finished and reviewed and merged in. So then we can move forward with the migration. Yeah.
So are we going to set the triggers, Patrick, so that we can check how the triggers work?
Are we going to set the trigger? I'm not sure what you mean.
The triggers for loading. So are we going to create the table, the partition tables, and set the triggers that load the partition tables on insert and update?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not. I mean, we could. I think it makes sense at this point. We're so close in the third part to get the third part merged in, and then we can just run the whole migration. Initially, we had talked about just rolling the migration out in stages, but I think now we're close enough that we can just do it all at once. But yeah, hopefully we'll be ready to. Andreas already has a MR out there to add the actual migration that would run the partitioning job. So I think once the third piece gets merged in, then he can update his MR and get that merged in, and then it would start to kick off the migration process.
Okay, and maybe after we check with Andreas that the generator and the benchmark works correctly, maybe we run a test on GCP with the generated data to make sure that the migration works, and then release it to production. I'm not sure if you agree.
Yeah, that sounds good. I would like to test it somewhere. That would be a good idea, I think.
Yeah.
Was that a general goal or a goal for you, Giannis?
It will be most probably will be a goal for Andreas.
Okay.
But maybe I can do it or Andreas can do it. It's not important.
Yep. I'll just put both your names on there.
The difficult part is Patrick's work.
It all focuses on Patrick. Gotcha. Okay. So did I summarize this first part right? So the high level goal is to get the partition tables out in production. It might be a stretch at this point based on the third piece of the migration work that Pat's working on.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cool. Anything else for goals for this week? Looks like we have a lot of little things in 13.1.
Yeah, get the little ones out, and also as I said that before, we are still we're going to make sure that and evaluate that the benchmark and generator work correctly. So we'll have to do those checks and query plans and check that they work.
Okay. Do we want to? Are there any issues in 13.1 that you all are concerned about not making it?
Yeah, on my end, only if we decide that we postpone the anonymization script, but this will be a decision whether we do it.
Yeah, I think for my end too, I think everything I'm working on right now, I'm pretty confident we'll get into 13.1.
Okay. Just looking at the list now. Does it show health status? Okay. Yeah, if y'all could take a moment sometime in the next day or two and make sure the health status on all those are up to date. Looks like they're not, or at least on the couple that I've looked at. I wish there was a way to, I wish there was a quick action for those. It'd be a little easier. All right. Anything else on goals for next week, or is that pretty well summarized what we have? We can get, I'll chat with Andreas tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that those are fine.
Okay. Couple follow-up items. So from the company retro, or the engineering-wide retro, and when I was summarizing database retro, I think the two of you actually mentioned that you had a couple MRs that were bigger than you had expected. So I was thinking it might be a good time for us to do an iteration retro. Any thoughts on that? And any questions on what an iteration retro is? You know what I mean when I say that?
You mean we should check the MRs and discuss what should have been done?
Yeah, so the goal of an iteration retro is to like personally pick one or two MRs that you think could have been broken down into smaller iterations, and we discuss as a team like, okay, looking back on this MR, I would have made it smaller by doing this and going through it as a team, having that retro and focusing on smaller iterations, smaller MRs.
Yeah, I would find that helpful.
Okay.
Okay.
I will just hijack one of these meetings. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll do it after. Let's get through next week. So I'll schedule it for the week of the 22nd. So we're not interfering with like the end of a milestone and trying to scramble to get things done for the release. So
Yeah.
and then have either of you spent any time with Postgres AI?
I didn't have that much time yet.
I've done a little bit, just not just like the features that we already use Slack for, the Joe stuff.
Is it easier to use with the Enterprise Edition, or is it pretty much the same for you so far?
I mean, it's the same. It's just a lot nicer to use. It is nicer to work with, and having the history and stuff is really helpful. Like if I do something and I want to look at it tomorrow versus like trying to search through Slack, it's a big improvement.
Yeah, you cannot search through Slack. It was impossible. You had to go and start over. At least that's what I was doing. So having the history there.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to set up a recurring feedback loop so that we can justify whether or not it's worth it, or how far, if it is worth it for individuals, if we want to roll it out to the larger engineering team, and who would end up wanting it. It's not super expensive on an individual basis, but we still need to make sure that it provides more value than it costs, right? So
yeah, it has those small improvements that if you have to check a lot of things like the history, the link directly to the PZ and the other planners, the other visualizers, that's very nice. But yeah, I have personally not used the more hardcore features.
Yeah, that's where it'll be really interesting. I think the thin clones, there's a lot of promise there for testing. I know there's some things we need to navigate from a security standpoint, make sure we're not violating any of our security protocols. I could see it providing value for not just the thin clones, but the session sharing could provide a lot of value for folks that are just getting used to Postgres and need to learn about it, and they want to pair with someone that's more senior. So fortunately, we have 6 months to trial this and make sure it's worth the effort. So, all right, thanks for that early feedback. Anything else we need to cover for the team meeting portion of this?
I think that we're done. We're set.
Okay.